Last episode, we added this massive mining district to our Ultimate Villager Island, but today I want to go even bigger. And seeing as though this is the video that will most likely put us over 100,000 subscribers if we haven't already hit it, I figured it would be very fitting if today we tackled the entertainment district of the island. This is without a doubt going to be the most complex and most colorful build we have ever made in this series, and I am really looking forward to it. And I do briefly want to thank you all for 100,000 subscribers, but I'll talk more about that in another video. For now, let's get started on prepping the area for all of these buildings. And we're going to begin by finally clearing out the rest of the forest that's on the island. Everything is going to go, every last tree, and they all need to go. This place definitely looks really weird with all the trees missing, but we're going to fix that. And we're going to start fixing that by taking some grass blocks and some dirt blocks and filling in a bunch of these creeper holes and helping to flatten and smooth out the land a bit more just so that it looks better and so that we have some extra room to work with when we're building all of these new structures. I'm also going to briefly spend some time bone mealing some of our remaining spruce saplings, and we're just going to chop down all these tall spruce wood trees to get all the spruce wood we'll need for this first build. The next thing we're going to need to prep for this is a bunch of calcite. Now, I already have a lot of calcite, but I've mentioned before that the mega base that is eventually going to go here is going to match the style of our starter base. So it's going to be made out of white wool, diorite, and of course, calcite. So having that information in the back of my mind, I want to be able to save as much of our calcite as possible for that build. So we're going to go fly out to another mountain range and try to find some more. There we go, we filled up a couple of shulker boxes, so now we can safely head home. I gotta tell you, man, this mining area is looking so good, especially at night with all the lanterns glowing and the sparkling coming from the amethyst. So sick. But anyways, we're going to pick one of these mine entrances that I created here, and we're actually going to start digging down to see what we can find. And what we're looking for now is actually what I briefly talked about earlier. We need a bunch of diorite. So we'll just dig out this hallway, collecting any coal and iron we find along the way as well. And I think we found a pocket here, so I'm going to get to work on completely hollowing this out. And there we go. We almost have 2 full shulker boxes. Shulker boxes. Shulker. Just speak. And there we go. We have almost 2 shulker boxes full of diorite, so I think we're good to head back to the surface because that should be enough for this one building. And as I search through these other chests looking for the supplies that I know I already have that we'll need, such as stone and cobblestone, I want to tell you about this first building we're making. And seeing as though we're getting ready to celebrate 100,000 subscribers, I figured it would make the most sense if the first thing we built in this project was an automated rocket farm. So basically, this farm is going to house a sugarcane farm and be the main storage unit for all of our gunpowder, and we're actually going to use some auto crafters at some point today to help us, well, automatically craft rockets. That way we'll always be able to fly around in our elytra without having to worry about running out of fuel. Oh, and we're also going to make it so that we can launch proper fireworks out of this building to put on full brightly colored firework displays for holidays and things that can be seen from anywhere in the city. But unfortunately, before we can get to starting on that, I have run out of tuff, so we're heading back down into the mine shafts. We're going to create a new branch underground here, and we're going to go all the way down to Deep Slate and start looking for as much tuff as we can possibly get our hands on. With the tuff collected, the next thing we need is some mud blocks to create packed mud. So we're going to be flying over to the mangrove swamp to collect some of that, and then we'll be heading back home to the wheat farm to help us craft up some of that packed mud. There has definitely been a lot of back and forth in this episode so far. Unfortunately, that trend does not stop now, as we need to head to the Nether to collect the next block on our list, which is basalt. And I gotta tell you, no amount of hours of playing this game will ever make me not afraid of the Nether, especially in hardcore. And now that we have an elytra, flying around in the Nether just sounds like a recipe for disaster, so I gotta really be careful. But with that basalt collected, we are finally ready to begin building the firework farm. And so we're going to begin by getting an outline of the foundation down just so we can visualize where each part of this build is going to go. And the first thing we're actually going to build is kind of like this front entrance little area with another side entrance slash shack kind of made out of wood off to the right. And now a lot of this build is going to mimic the style of actual houses, because I wanted to make it look like the villager family that lives here built their living quarters around the firework forge that they work in. So the plan is to have a bunch of house-like structures attached to these two giant pillars sticking out of the center of the build. And moving on from the front of the build, we're going to go directly to the right-hand side here, and we're just going to build up a couple more house-looking structures, and we're also going to be adding some like pillars or giant furnace kind of looking structures in the back, and I'll explain what those are for later. Continuing forward, we're moving to the back side of the build where we're going to build up 2 more pillars, a couple more little house pieces, and we're also going to be building another wooden part of the build to kind of just break up that stone and diorite palette that we have going on here. And we're also going to start building a bridge, which is also going to act as kind of a tunnel off to the right. And finally, we're going to complete that tunnel and bridge section and connect it to another pillar off to the left side of the build. We're also going to add 2 additional sections to the top of these pillars or forges, and we're going to complete the bridge by filling it in with some oak planks and stripped oak wood. Now I know what you guys are thinking. Incy, there are holes everywhere. This is not... What are you doing? Well, if you've been around the channel for a while now, I'm sure you guys already understand that the way I build, it is very much, as I always say, a trust the process type of scenario. I have plans for this and it's going to be really cool, but there are some other things we need to get done first. And we're going to begin by placing a lot of smaller details around the build, like adding trapdoors as more decoration, scaffolding for windows, mud brick walls for support beams, more trapdoors for window shutters, blackstone buttons to act as nails, spruce fence gates to act as support, also taking a quick photo shoot break to really appreciate the beauty of our creeper farm. God, I love this thing. And then just adding in some more buttons, some more fence gates, and of course some more scaffolding. I'm also going to come up to the top of the roofs here and add in some more trapdoors to give us more of that like kind of spined roof look that I did in the mining district. I think it looks pretty cool, and although we did it with stone last time, we're just going to try it out with some wood this time around. But now we're going to come to the inside of the tunnel here, and we're going to start by lining both sides of the entrance with trapdoors. And we're also going to be adding a bunch of stairs to the top as well that correspond with the nearest block on the outside of the entrance. That way it will blend seamlessly and we'll get a pretty cool kind of curved shape to the build. But then we'll just come in and finish off with those trapdoors I was talking about, and that definitely looks a lot better. We're also going to add some regular fences as windows in the middle bridge section here. I could have done scaffolding again, but I like to break up my window structures in my builds. I don't like them all looking the same. And then we're going to take some time to fill in some of the smaller holes that I have dotted around the build. I left these empty to make room for stairs and wall variants of different blocks to make it look like the building has kind of been falling apart over the years. You know, some bricks are missing every now and again to add a little bit of extra detail and depth to the build. I also love how when you're walking through this tunnel, you get a perfect frame of the creeper farm. I think that view was so cool. I'm also going to come to the top here and add a bunch of walls to the top of these kind of like chute structures. Now, these centerpieces are actually going to be where we fire off the fireworks for our big shows and displays that we'll eventually be putting on here in the city. I think having them centered directly in the middle of the build would make the most sense. And the 3 other chutes in the back of the build that I was talking about earlier, those are also meant to look like firework chutes as well. So although they're not going to be functional, I figured it would be pretty cool if we included 3 more, just again, to add more of an interesting look to the build. But with that done, it's time to fill in the bigger holes that you guys are seeing in the build. And I'm going to prepare you now. This segment of the video is going to get very messy because I am going to be trying out some new building techniques and really playing around with a bunch of different colors, so we'll see how this goes. But we're going to start by heading home and grabbing some cocoa beans for brown dye. I'm also going to need some white dye, some roses for red dye. Of course, we're going to need lapis for blue dye, and we're going to need to combine that with red dye to get purple dye. I'm also going to have to whip up a jungle tree, that way we can grow some more of those cocoa beans to get more brown dye. And I'm also going to be requiring some bamboo blocks, weirdly enough. Also in need of yellow dye. I am going to require some packed ice as well. I told you it was gonna get weird. And to add to that weirdness, we're also going to need some cherry logs, some blocks of clay, and finally we're going to need a bunch of sand to smelt into glass. Now I'm going to spend a few minutes collecting a bunch of other blocks I need, like for example cherry planks, stripped cherry logs, and a bunch of different kinds of colored wool and colored glass. But with that done, I'm going to fire up Litematica and load in the preset I built to help me make this build. And I'm going to start just placing these blocks in different gradients around the build on the outside, and then covering them with different colored stained glass. And the goal is to create a situation where it looks like a bunch of colored dye and gunpowder has been flung all over the building. You know, we're going to be having a bunch of fireworks shot off from this area, so I thought it would only make sense that, you know, some of those colors spill out and don't land properly and actually end up hitting the build, staining it a bunch of different colors. I'm also going to take a quick moment to use some stained glass panes on the center of the build to again make it look like more color is streaming down the bridge area. And from afar, I think that works really well. Now, of course, when you zoom in, you're going to be able to see the individual blocks and it's going to look a lot more messy, but that's not where we're primarily going to be viewing this thing from, and that's what we have to keep in mind. That definitely added the splash of interesting colors that I was looking for, and it just helps to bring more character to the build. At least I think it does. But with the main part of this build basically complete, we're going to go ahead and move on to the terrain to make everything look smoother. And we're just going to replace as much of the sand as we possibly can with grass. And then we're actually going to start extending said grass to give us an opportunity to build more of a steeper cliffside that actually heads into the ocean. With all that grass placed, we're just going to come in here now and start layering some stone, while of course avoiding all of the hostile mobs that are spawning under the grass I placed. I don't know why I didn't put torches under there, but I'm definitely paying for that mistake now. But we're just going to keep going here with a couple layers of stone, and then we're going to come in with a bunch of stone slabs and stone stairs to help smooth out the transition. And the first portion of these rocks looks so good that I decided to extend this design all the way towards the back of the build and wrapping around the left side of it. Alright, so I have a bunch of blocks left over from the build itself, so I'm going to reuse a lot of these and actually build a little dock behind the firework farm. And I figured it would make sense to have a dock here since our creeper farm is just across the water, and one way or another, this city or civilization would need to transport gunpowder from the creeper farm to where the fireworks are made. So if we had a little receiving and loading dock here, I think that would be pretty cool. Now this one isn't going to be anywhere near as complicated as the bigger one in the fishing village, but I think it'll still add a little bit of story building to the world here. I definitely think this looks okay and will do for now. I'm not really the biggest fan of the overall shape of it. I think it's a little too simple, but as far as the decorations go, I think we knocked it out of the park. I also added one of my janky little ship builds here too. But anyways, it's time that we move on to the meat and bones of this project, which is actually building the sugarcane farms on the inside, which are going to produce paper. And we're going to do this by using a combination of pistons, observers, and redstone. This is a very simple classic sugarcane farm design. You all have probably seen this before. We're going to go ahead and fill up this first tower with a bunch of these just stacked on top of each other. And then towards the bottom, we're just going to add a bunch of hoppers to catch all of the falling sugarcane. Now's the time that we make our first ever auto crafter in the series. And I gotta be honest, I really don't know how these things work. I know I need two of them, one to create paper and then the other one to create the fireworks out of the paper and gunpowder, and we need ways to funnel each block into them and make it all work together. This is going to get really complicated. And I don't know what I'm doing, but we're going to try for it anyways. But all right, I think I got everything working. And if we look in this barrel, yes, it is creating fireworks. That's so cool. I'm so glad that works the way it does. But now, off in the side entrance here, I have this chest hooked up to a bunch of hoppers. Now, this is where we're going to be storing our gunpowder. And we're going to have the gunpowder basically funneling in from this giant storage room, going into the auto crafter itself. So we're just going to finish off this storage room real quick. I know I really don't do interiors in these videos, but I figured I'd treat you guys a little bit since it's the 100K special. Might as well show off some interior building. And then we can also make some slabs for some shelves. And we can take out the floor and replace that with some stone, cobblestone, and tough blocks. And then we'll just start throwing some barrels and chests down. And we'll go ahead and put in a roof to separate the storage room from what could be a little housing section of the build. And I also want to design a ladder over here. And so if we place these two fences against a bunch of chests and slabs, they actually won't connect to them. So it'll give the appearance of an actual floating ladder. And that way we can have a bit more of a 3D element instead of having just like a regular ladder plastered up on one of the sides of the walls. And we'll just go ahead and finish off this back wall here. And then the last thing we need to do is just transport all of our gunpowder storage from the creeper farm over to the actual gunpowder storage room. Now, once again, I'm going to build another interior. That's 2 interiors in one day, guys. You're getting the full treatment today. The real NC experience. But yeah, I'm just going to spend some time decorating the entrance to this build here, kind of like the small workshop area. And I'm going to start by placing some bamboo blocks down with some trapdoors around it. I'm trying to make it look like these are the tubes that the gunpowder is actually shoved into that helps create the rocket. I don't know how well that's going to look. We're probably going to end up putting candles on top of these later, but we're going to rock with it and see how it turns out. I'm also going to use some item frames, and I do have the invisible item frame texture pack, so I'm going to use some of these to help create some hanging tools. You can also put like a shovel in the corner there to just, some kind of tool or hand shovel to show like somebody's trying to, scoop the gunpowder and put them into the barrel things. I don't know. I'm kind of winging it here. And I'd also like to create some kind of mixer off to the side. Well, this is going to take me a couple of attempts. And then we're also going to place in some barrels of dyed gunpowder too. Well, I mean, it's actually dyed concrete powder, but you know what I mean. And then finally, the last thing we need to do is create a couple of short clocks next to dispensers in the wooden bridge section of the build here. And this is what is eventually going to be our firework launching system. Now we're going to hook it up to a much more complicated system later, but for now this will do. Well, with that, I think this firework farm is done. And if you want to see the full display in full effect, you're going to have to watch towards the end of the video, because trust me, you're not going to want to miss that. But with that, it's time to get moving on to the next part of this project. And we're actually going to be removing something instead of building something for this next part, namely this big piece of pink highlighted land here. I actually really would like for the entertainment district to be kind of separated from the main island itself, because we are going to be having other villager housing and living areas over here. So I kind of want to separate the place where people have fun and where people live. So we're going going to be building this big ravine, kind of a giant cut in the ground that stretches the length of the island. And eventually we'll have a bridge connecting the two different places, but for now we're just going to dig it out and then build it back up a little bit to make it look pretty. Alright, so we have made quite a bit of progress. We have all the room we'll need to build back up the rock formations that I want. And I left these walls on the right and left side of the ravine here just to prevent any water from flowing in while we're actually building up the surfaces of the rocks. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with some mud and deep slate. And we're going to use this mud and deep slate to line the bottom of the river to make the river look deeper than it actually is. It's going to give it a much darker color, so it'll give the illusion of depth. And speaking of depth, if you want to dive deeper into the lore and content of youtube.com/Incy, I recommend checking out my Patreon page. For just $3 a month, you get access to things like member shoutouts, behind the scenes videos and content, exclusive Discord roles, and early access to ad-free versions of all my YouTube videos. And for $10 a month, you get access to all those previously mentioned things, as well as the downloads to all my build schematics and world files. And I'd also like to give a shout out to all my current Patreon members and channel members. Your support is essential in keeping the channel going, so I really appreciate everything you do for me. Right, so the rock work is done and all the mud and deep slate and stone and tuff and cobblestone, all the different blocks I used are all in place. Now it's time for us to go in and fill in all the water. Now that we have the island separated into two and we have all the water in place, I want to build a bit of a wall and a gatehouse on the entertainment district side of the island. And eventually we'll probably have another wall on the other side as well. I think it would be pretty cool if you have to cross through two different gatehouses in order to get to the entertainment district. But for now, we're just going to start with one. And I'm going to build this thing up by starting with cobblestone at the bottom, transitioning to stone, and then andesite towards the top. And I'm also going to be using some basalt and deep slate as well as tuff blocks to help me create some shadows. I'm also going to use stone bricks for a little bit of extra detail and texture, and then I want to have a couple of spires or towers dotted throughout the wall. And I'm going to be using an assortment of spruce blocks and mud brick blocks to help get some brown tones in there. And then to stay consistent with the theme of the rest of the builds on the island, I'm going to be using calcite and diorite to add in some white coloring too. And for the towers, I actually decided to put some roofs on them, and I made them look as sloped and as pointy as possible. The reason why I'm doing this is because this is the entertainment district. I want it to be a little bit more fun and whimsical than everywhere else on the island, and I think that gets that message across pretty well. But since the majority of the wall is now done, I just have to go in with some stairs here to help finish off kind of the border, or I guess the railing on the top of the wall, well, obviously so that people and villagers don't fall off. And then I'm going to come in with a bunch of different wall variants to, again, just make this a safer place to travel. And then finally, I'm just going to decorate it some more with some spruce buttons to give a little bit more of that brown color spread out throughout the wall. That way it's not just on the roofs of the buildings. And with that, I think the wall is done. And you know, I gotta say, especially from a distance, I think the shadows that I built are working really, really well. Yeah, this is definitely starting out a lot cooler than I thought. I'm happy with it. let's move on. And I'm kind of just going to skip over this next part of the video because basically what I need to do is just move a bunch of the resources that we've collected from where our normal storage area is to a temporary chest monster that's going to be housing all of the things we need for the entertainment district. But while I was moving all of those items, I realized that I had forgotten a couple of materials, one of which being dark oak wood. I need a lot of dark oak wood. So we're heading over to the dark oak islands that's right off of our starter island, and I'm going to throw down a beacon to kind of hopefully help me almost insta-mine all this wood. I don't actually know if you can insta-mine wood using a beacon. I do have an efficiency 5 netherite axe, but I don't know. We'll see. I mean, if it doesn't work, at least, I don't know, we'll look cooler while we're doing it. But yeah, I'm just gonna put this beacon down just because, and then we're gonna get to chopping down some trees. Another resource that we're going to need that I actually ran out of while I was building the wall is spruce wood. And instead of using up the rest of our bone meal, I decided to fly out to an actual taiga biome and chop down some of the trees there because we're never really going to be over in this area anyway, so I don't care if it looks really ugly. But with that done, I'm now going to fly out to a desert so that way I can get some sandstone and some smooth sandstone. And if you're wondering why I'm gathering all these weird type of stone blocks, it's because I want to have a bunch of different variations of housing in the actual entertainment district. You know, I said at the beginning of this video, I want this to be a very colorful and fun to look at build, so I'm basically just going to be throwing in as many different types of blocks as I possibly can. In addition to that, we're going to take a minute to go back to the mining district, and we're going to use one of these tunnels that we got started here to help us find some granite, andesite, and diorite, because we are going to be needing all of those blocks as well. Another chore on our list is actually getting a fortune shovel. And the reason why we need to do that is because I want a bunch of bricks in this build as well. So we're going to be taking this fortune shovel and heading out to a nearby lush cave system. And we're just going to scoop up as much clay as we could possibly get our hands on. But with that, we have most of the materials that we need. Anything else is kind of just straggler items that we can collect as we go along. So I actually want to start building a few of the houses, and I'm going to build all of the ones that are going to be along the main entrance or the main road into the entertainment district. So we're going to start by just laying these out, and then we're going to test some shop ideas on them quickly too. Alright, we got the main shell for these first 5 houses in order, so I'm going to attempt to start decorating some of them. And I think this first building I want to actually be like a rose shop. So I'm going to be using some mangrove wood to give us a little bit of a red texture to this build. Could even throw in some red and white awnings using some stairs, some diorite stairs and some mangrove plank stairs. And we can just throw down some roses and maybe some poppies too. And we'll get a couple different variations of pots in here as well. And I'm also going to use our invisible item frame texture pack to create a little sign to show that this is a rose shop using, of course, that item frame, a trapdoor, and some roses. I think that looks pretty good. That gets the message across, right? Yeah, good enough for me. And I think that shop looks pretty good. I think it looks a little empty right now still, but once we filled the street with other decorations, it's going to be pretty cluttered and chaotic, so trust me when I say this is definitely enough detail for this first shop. Now I just want to go down this line of houses and basically repeat the same process. And I think I want this first road to primarily be like a botanical section. We are going to be having a very large greenhouse, which I'm going to build later in the video. So for this first street, since it's going to be next to the greenhouse, I think it would make sense if like all of the flowers from said greenhouse are sold here. But with a lot of the shops on the first road done, we're going to come over here to the other side quickly to build up some more houses. And then we're going to come in with good old Litematica here, and I've already designed the greenhouse in Creative, so we're going to be plopping that in right on the corner of this street here. With the greenhouse done, I actually want to come to the inside here and I want to create kind of a moss farm. Now, I may be changing this later in the video to a bone meal farm. It depends on how efficient this design turns out. I've never tried it before, but we're going to build it on the inside nonetheless to hopefully have a moss and or bone meal farm working in the background while we build the rest of the structures around here. Alright, so the moss farm appears to be working decently well. We appear to be getting an okay amount of bone meal. Again, I may make this bigger later in the video, so we'll see as time goes on. But with that, I want to head back outside to the main road here, and I want to begin putting in just as much detail as I possibly can. Okay guys, so here we go. I have spent a lot of time detailing the street. I have everything from, tables with pots on them, different kinds of flowers, a bunch of hanging banners and clothing, hanging signs as well, and just a bunch of different shops going along the road here, making this area feel very lived in. And this took a while to figure out, but I have to say I'm very happy with the vibe that this is giving off, and I cannot wait for the entire area to feel like this. It's gonna be insane. But now that I have an idea of the particular direction I want this build to go in, it's time to do what is most likely going to be the biggest, most time-consuming portion of this video, which is building up all of the framework for all the other houses in the entertainment district. And so since this is going to be a pretty big portion of the video, I wanted to do the comment of the day segment right here. And so today's comment of the day comes from Jurassic Aiden 13, and he basically says, "Good job on the video. Also, you should make an alchemy place that's abandoned in the Pale Garden. After watching Dan TDM's newest video on his Minecraft world, it looks beautiful, and maybe you could add a maze as if it were like that one forest in Breath of the Wild." So Aiden, thank you for the comment, and the reason I chose your comment is because this is a good way for me to talk about and reveal a bit of my future plans for this hardcore world. And a part of that is the fact that I do plan to have an alchemy type of building as one of my next structures. I don't know if it's going to be the next video or a couple more videos down the road, but it's towards the top of my to-do list. And what I'd actually like to do is have an alchemy or potion building inside of an abandoned observatory. You see, in my world, I know I don't talk about the lore often, but it is pretty extensive, and it's also very layered. Like earlier in this series, I mentioned how you'll be able to kind of see the class system of the villagers play out on the survival island. The richer villagers will be using the more expensive materials in their homes, like calcite and diorite, while the more working class of villagers will be using things like stone and wood. But there's actually more to that. You see, in my world, there were actually multiple civilizations that lived here before the current villagers did, and they were much more advanced in their stonecraft. So any type of structures, including the starter base that you see that's made out of calcite and diorite and the marble looking blocks, those structures actually came from a prior civilization that somehow got wiped out. And these new villagers have moved in, and they're the ones that are kind of adding on to those already existing structures, building with wood and regular types of stone. Now, the reason why I tell you all of that is because it does directly relate to the potion and alchemy shop that I want to make. I would like to try to create a structure that looks like those more advanced previous villagers had built an observatory out of marble, calcite, and diorite, and after it was abandoned, when the new villagers moved in, they didn't really know what to make of the structure and they didn't know how it worked. So instead of refurbishing it and actually using it as an observatory, they use it as a potion shop. So I have a lot of designing on that build to do behind the scenes because it's going to be very complicated to show multiple layers of custom written history into one build. But yeah, anyways, once again, Aiden, thank you for the comment, and let's get back to the video. And this place is looking amazing. I'm very happy with how this is turning out. we've got all the buildings in place, so now it's time to start detailing the vast majority of them. And we're going to start by coming in with some different kinds of chimneys in a couple of places. And what's great about these chimneys is not only are they going to add to the build and make it look cooler, but the light from some of the campfires that we'll be using on top of the buildings is going to help keep them mob proof, so we won't have to worry about anything spawning on top of us. But now, with all the chimneys in place, I want to kind of work on this right section down along the water here. Now, even though this area is primarily for entertainment, there needs to be a place for the villagers who work here to live. So this is kind of going to be like a residential street, but we're just going to get started on extending some of these buildings here and adding some more walkways for the villagers to get up to where they live. And we're also going to start laying out some of these pathways here using regular path blocks, coarse dirt, packed mud, and then maybe some gravel or cobblestone every now and again. Okay, so most of the pathways are done, and now I actually want to start decorating the buildings themselves a little bit. And so I'm going to start with just the regular design that we've been doing for a while to create some kind of supports on these overhanging buildings using fence gates. And we're also going to do the same design on the roofs as well. So we're pretty much just going to fill in as many empty spaces with these gates as possible. And then we're going to come in with some doors to create some entrances. And I'm going to turn this little raised patio area here into kind of like a seating area, or maybe like a little deck for whoever lives here. And then I'm going to take that same railing design I used there, utilizing an assortment of trapdoors, and I'm going to create some more railings on the walkways leading up to some of the other buildings. And another thing I like to do is create some more balconies every once in a while, just to give some of these villagers more room to breathe and to add some detail to these buildings. And I'm just going to do that using some slabs and stairs for the floor, and then again that same trapdoor railing idea. And these buildings are also going to need some windows, and I've really been liking this kind of bay window, I guess, design that I've been using in the village. So I'm going to place some more of these in. And I think while I do this, I might fire up another live stream and complete some of this with you guys. And speaking of which, now would be a good time to tell you to subscribe if you haven't already and if you're enjoying the video. And also definitely make sure you have your bell notifications on, because these previously mentioned live streams are a really good way to see everything that I do off camera. I know a lot of times in my videos, it can feel like I kind of just appear with resources, but if you come to my live streams, you get to watch me do a lot of that resource gathering live, and you get to see a bunch of behind the scenes stuff, so it's pretty cool. But here we are. I absolutely love the way this turned out. I think we did a really good job of detailing it to a point where it feels lived in, but not detailing it too much to a point where it feels chaotic and cluttered. I think I nailed the vibe that I wanted to go for. I'm really enjoying this place. We have a bunch of balconies and a bunch of clotheslines hanging using banners and fences. We've got lanterns and plants everywhere. We also have a little tree that we built to help fill in some space as well and to add some more greenery. I can't wait for the entire island to look like this. This is just a little taste of what we're going for, but I'm in love with it so far. Now I want to kind of come to this little edge area over here. There's a bit of empty space. I'd like to bone meal it a little bit, get some green moss going to add some shrubbery, and I think we're going to build a few more custom trees here just to give us a nice little lookout point for the villagers to have, a nice view while they're walking through their city. Now, moving back more towards the center of the village, I want to start filling out the rest of the pathways. It feels a little weird that only one section of the pathways are done, and I think it'll help move this process along if we can visualize what this area is going to look like when the actual roads are installed. So we're going to start building those in the middle of the town square and then moving outwards from there. And I'm going to be using an assortment of different blocks. For the main road, I want it to be made of a little bit higher quality looking materials. And so for the main road and the town square, I'm going to use a combination of coarse dirt, bricks, and granite to create a bit of a reddish hue to the road. And again, to make it look like the main road is made of a bit of higher quality material. And then as we branch out from the main road, we'll go back to what we were using previously, that being the coarse dirt, path blocks, and packed mud. And there we go. This whole area is completely filled out, except for there's a little patch of grass that's underneath all the chests we're using that I haven't done yet. But we don't need to worry about that right now. I actually want to start working on this corner building here. I really like the look of it, and I think I want to turn this into some kind of reading area or library. You know, reading during medieval times was one of the only forms of entertainment, so I think having a really big reading nook that's almost a side centerpiece to this area would make sense. So we'll start by just putting in some more of those windows. I want this entire kind of like outcrop circular shape to be a giant window. I think that would be pretty cool. And then we're going to fly off to where our end portal is, and I'm going to use a pickaxe to mine down these bookshelves. This is one of the least satisfying things I have ever done, but I really do not feel like installing Silk Touch on an axe right now, so we're going to rock with what we got, and we're going to take these home and start building the library. And we'll just create kind of like a semicircle on the inside so you can see all of the books from the street. Then I'm also going to create a second layer here, and I'm going to install some dark oak wood floors. And I'm also going to create the look of some shelves using some slabs. This will also give us the opportunity to place maybe a couple of pots with plants on them every now and again. And then I'm just going to kind of create a little bit of a side entrance here, and I'm also going to install another small balcony on the top of the build here. That way there's a bit of an outdoor reading area as well. We're going to create a second balcony over to the right of the build too. That way there's more than one. And then right below it, we're going to have this kind of like outdoor smaller bookshop. So for people who maybe are in a bit of a rush and don't want to go inside, there can be an outdoor section with all of the best-selling books that people can buy just right off the street. But there we go. I think that's a really good start, and I think it looks cute. We're going to detail the rest of the interior on stream in the future, but for now, this will definitely do. So next, directly across from the library in the same kind of road section, we have another house that I'm actually going to tear down. I do want this to be kind of a small bamboo shop and bamboo farm. This isn't going to be our main source of bamboo. Rather, I'd like for this to actually be a place where we store all of our scaffolding. I think it makes sense because, you know, you craft scaffolding using bamboo. So yeah, little bamboo shop. But instead of a regular house, I want to do something a little more exotic. And I'm actually going to start by marking out the outline for another secondary kind of smaller greenhouse. Again, I really want to put an emphasis on all of the plant life and crops and shrubbery that these villagers grow. I want these villagers to really have a deep love and connection to plant life and their environment in general, so I think having a bunch of greenhouses everywhere would really get that message across. But for the main pillars and structure of this build, I'm going to use some stripped dark oak logs, and then I'm going to use a combination of regular blue and light blue stained glass to create a bit of a stained glass window. Our main greenhouse is going to have green stained glass windows in a little bit. I think I might actually take down the original design for the greenhouse. I want the new one to be a little bit bigger, but anyways, since we're going to be using green glass over there, I figured using blue over here would look pretty cool. And having the blue glass in combination with the green bamboo coming through in the background, I think that's going to look sick. I'm also going to want to install some more interesting looking architecture kind of along the edges of the build to give us a bit more of a unique shape. We can also use some mud walls and some regular fences to create some support pillars. And then we're just going to come onto the inside here and start bone mealing some moss. We're going to use some string to prevent bamboo from growing too tall. Then on the outside here, we'll create another little circular entrance. And I think we're going to have a little bit of a shelf/storage situation in the back along the back wall. So we're going to put some shelves in and use some barrels and chests for our storage. Could also throw some different pots down, and then we're going to hang some lanterns and some plants from the ceiling as well. But there we go. This bamboo greenhouse is done, and I think it looks absolutely gorgeous, especially with shaders. I threw a spore blossom down as well. That way we get that cool kind of grassy particle thing going on, and it is 100% helping us to bring this place to life. I also added a bunch of decorations on the outside to make it look like whoever owns the bamboo shop is selling everything they're growing on the inside, on the outside of the place, and I think that helps out a lot as well. Now that we have this greenhouse done, I'm really in the mood to continue like the foliage trend here, so we're going to tear down the old greenhouse structure that I had. I don't like the look of it, and I know I can do much better, so we're just going to completely erase it and start brand new. This next one, I'm going to be using a combination of green, lime green, and yellow stained glass to make up the majority of the build, and then all of the support pillars and everything are going to be made out of tuff. And I'm also probably going to throw in some dark oak wood decorations as well. That way we stay consistent with this dark and kind of greenish tone using the dark oak wood and the tuff to match the glass. Dude, let me just tell you, this thing looks awesome. Especially on the inside with complementary shaders. Look at the way the green light from the sun is shining through. I absolutely cannot wait to fill this thing with plants. It's going to look absolutely gorgeous. Dude, there's a high likelihood that I'm like possibly the best person who has ever played this game. And that's being modest. No, obviously, I'm just kidding, but I'm absolutely in love with this thing. But before we can start building on the inside, I have to fix up some of the path work on the outside. And then I want to redo this little shop over to the left of the greenhouse here. Well, there we go. I think that looks good. Now I just also want to come in and kind of expand the kind of tent that we have here to give this outdoor shop some more coverage from the weather and elements and things. Speaking of weather, it immediately starts raining as soon as we put that up. Immersion. All right, it's time to head inside. One of the first things I want to do is actually build the bigger bone meal farm that I was talking about earlier. The small one that we had was nice, but it actually wasn't renewable. The more we let it run, we were actually losing bone meal, so it was a net negative design. But anyways, this design that we're using is actually the same bone meal farm design that I used in my regular survival series. And if you guys don't know, my regular survival series is actually my most favorite Minecraft world that I've ever had. So I would definitely recommend checking out that series. I'm going to be posting more on it in the near future, so keep that in mind. So there we go. The bone meal farm is done and it fits perfectly snug inside the building here. I'm kind of annoyed that we're not going to be able to hide it as well as I would like to, but I think this will do for now. We can always come back and change it later. But for the moment, I just want to take a minute to sit here and let this thing go for a while so we can collect some bone meal and use that to create that lush environment throughout the rest of the build. And we're going to start by marking out some pathways within the structure here. I want these paths to be made of tuff to match the rest of the building. And then we're just going to start creating some shelving and storage units throughout the build. Because, you know, not only is this going to be our bone meal farm, but this is where I want to store all of our moss and leaf blocks. We won't ever really have a ton of them all at once, I don't think, so just having a little bit of decoration storage is an okay idea for me. Also want to design a couple of little decorative benches around the place. That way our botanical villagers have, you know, some areas to practice their botany. Is that the right word? Who do plant gardeners? Why is that something that eluded my brain? These are gardeners. But yeah, I just want to have a couple of benches for our gardener villagers to have fun preparing and selling their plants. And then after that's done, we're just going to come in and fill in all the different types of foliage to get this place looking beautiful. Now, before I show off the inside of what I just did in the build, I want to come to the back of the build, and I want to have something that isn't at all functional, but I think is going to be really cool. Now, a lot of you know I am an absolutely massive fan of Game of Thrones. And like I said earlier in the video, I really want to put an emphasis on these villagers' connection to nature. So I'm actually going to build a custom forest area in the back here and my own variation of a weirwood tree. Now, these weirwood trees in Game of Thrones do have magical properties, but I don't want to include that in my lore of the actual world. Instead, I just want this to be a cool looking build as an homage to a series I love. And guys, before we go inside, I built this kind of outdoor shop area and I think it looks really cute and pretty, but before we go in, I have to say this is one of my most favorite things that I've ever made. I really was not expecting this to turn out this well, but just look at how gorgeous this greenhouse turned out. Oh my God. I feel like I managed to make this so cozy and just, this is exactly the vibe I wanted when you walk in here. And the shaders with that green and yellow light coming through is definitely helping, but just it's so cozy and so welcoming, and I just absolutely love the way it turned out. I've got everything from different kinds of pots to moss hanging off the side of barrels to different leaf blocks to represent bushes, a bunch of different flowers. I even have some mushrooms in flower pots, and I have more spore blossoms spread throughout the area. I've got glowberries hanging from the ceiling. I've got a couple of ladders dotted around the place so that the villagers can actually access the hanging plants and things. And I did spend a lot of time trying to cover up the bone meal farm as best as possible. I can't cover it completely because the lava that's in the bone meal farm will actually catch this place on fire if there were any blocks that are too close to it. So I did the best I could, and it doesn't look perfect, but I think it's hidden well enough to get the message across. And on the outside here, I also added in some more sections of plants and a little tree that you can walk under. And I love just the view of walking past that tree and bam, getting hit with the view of the starter base. Hold on, wait, let's do that again, because like you're just walking under here, can't see anything. Dude, it's gorgeous. I'm so good at this game, man. But yeah, you just keep walking back here through these trees. You get this nice, quaint view of the inside of the greenhouse. And then as you're coming down this wooded road, you're met with the view of the red and white weirwood tree. And I absolutely love the way this looks. I honestly love this place so much. I'm thinking about maybe starting all of my streams in this area or something. It's just the perfect place to relax and wind down when we're not building anything. I might add a couple of benches every now and again. Yeah, this is my favorite part of this world so far. But now with that done, it is time to move on to working on the town square. And I'm going to begin by shearing some of the sheep that I have dyed different colors. And then we're going to be taking that wool and building a couple of shops along the road here. And I actually want these to be kind of clothing shops. We're going to have armor stands with different dyed leather everywhere, but this is actually going to be the storage area for our wool and dye blocks temporarily. But there we go. This place is done, and I think it looks pretty good. I'm gonna be honest, it's not my favorite. I feel like there's something missing, and I don't really know what that is, but I think as the video goes on and we fill the area in with more details, this, again, similar to the first shops that we made, will start to make more sense. Now we're going to come over to this little building to the left here. We're going to add in some more bay windows, and we're going to add a little amethyst shop down at the bottom here. And the reason why I want this to be an amethyst shop is because I actually want there to be a giant amethyst geode in the town square. But with that pretty much done, I want to move over to this structure here. I'm going to remove the roof. I don't like the way it looks, and I have a bit of a different design idea in mind. Like I said earlier in this video, kind of talking about the lore of this world, I want to make it look like there are a bunch of these old structures that have been broken down and are being repurposed by these new villagers. So I think if this were actually some kind of torn down part of a castle that maybe used to be here. I think that would look pretty cool. So we're going to remove the roof, like I said. Then we're actually going to take out the center section of the wall here, and we're going to rebuild it up to make it look like a bit of some kind of bridge. And then we'll extend the pillars here, kind of making it look like they've been broken down as we go along. And then we can finish up detailing the bridge as well. And I'm also going to do my best here to make it look like this crumbled part of the castle has exposed a couple of different layers here on the inside. So we're just going to come in real quick and do some decorating, maybe add a light source or two to make this more visible and stand out at nighttime. And then I'm just going to put a roof on the other section of this little castle bit too. And yeah, zooming out a bit in free cam mode, that looks a lot better. I like that a lot. And it really helps to complement the firework farm. Now, I also want to have kind of a little bit of I guess a restaurant or a pub off to the right of the kind of shopping area or the clothing area. So we're going to build a little outdoor seating area. Then we'll add in some more windows and a little entrance as well. And then to kind of fill in space on the other side of the street there, I'm going to add in some more clothing racks. And so that way when people are walking down this road, they can eat and then go right to shopping. And then I'm just going to decorate this other building here to, again, help us to fill in some space. And one of the last things I want to do here is actually build the town center. Now, again, this centerpiece is going to be a giant exposed amethyst crystal. And the reason why I'm doing this is, if you remember in last episode, I talked about how this entire island is basically a giant amethyst meteorite that crashed into the ocean. And perhaps that also ties into some of the lore I was talking about earlier about the earlier civilizations being wiped out. But anyways, I think having like this amethyst cluster as like a piece of history sticking out from the ground and being honored by the villagers of the town would make a lot of sense. And to be completely honest with you, I think it would just look cool. And then after we're done with that, we're just going to fill in the rest of the houses with more decorations along the streets here to start putting on the finishing touches of the build. With all these streets filled in and the town square done, there is not a lot left for us to do, guys. This project is finally coming to a close. So before we put the finishing touches on, I want to say thank you so much for the support that you've given me over the years. Hitting 100,000 subscribers really is a dream come true for me, and I'll have a much more extensive video talking about that coming out later. But I want to say thank you for everything that you've done for me, and I really hope you've enjoyed this extensive episode. But with that, let's get to the final details of decorating this build, and we can call it a day. And so with that, guys, this is the entertainment district complete. I have added a bunch of new things since you last saw me to really help bring this place together. I've added everything from different colored hanging signs and banners to lanterns and soul lanterns, and I really just crammed in as much decoration as possible. And not to mention, I linked up an entire firework network under the ground here, so that way we can have these epic firework displays all throughout the city. And I just have to say, I think this build definitely did come out a little quirky and stupid, but I think it still looks absolutely gorgeous, and it really fits the theme and the style of buildings that I'm going for in this world. But thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. I had a ton of fun building this, and I hope you had fun watching. But once again, thank you all for everything. Slowly, day by day, you all really are changing my life, and there's nothing I could ever do to thank you for that. All I can do is hope that the content I give you is enough to satisfy in return. But just one more time, thank you for 100,000 subscribers. I hope you have enjoyed this video, but I gotta get going because I've got more work to do.